are the human stories, the heartbreaks and turbulent times, power players and defining moments, confidences and confessions, triumphs and celebrations. These are the stories of the Bombers. Few people have influenced the game of Australian football as much as John Coleman. He lit up the sky, and his brilliance dazzled all who witnessed his greatness.
The whole buzz was about Johnny Coleman.
The whole stand would be belting their feet on the wooden floorboards in anticipation of a Coleman lead from the goal square to soar above the pack with this spectacular mark.
He didn't actually use players to jump, he jumped over them.
And he jumped clean over, off the ground, Pat Kelly. Just jumped clean over him. Magnificent, unbelievable.
He'd be crouched in the goal square and then he'd look up and see Hutchison or that coming down from the centre, and then at the psychological moment he'd sprint and then just soar above the patch. The grandstand would just rock with excitement.
He really set the world on fire with his type of play. He'd just start off and he'd wave his arm like this, sort of saying, out that way, and then they'd get the ball out to him, high in the air. And it was revolutionary.
I don't think he realised he was as good as he was.
Just thrilling. Absolutely thrilling to see him rise in the pack and go way above them and take these fantastic marks and finish them off with these torpedo punts. I lost art today, which seemed to go on forever.
It was Easter Saturday 1949 when the young man from Hastings on Western Port Bay made his debut with the Bombers.
I can remember sitting on the bench in 1949 waiting to go out, and Coleman was doing the same. So I wandered over and wished him good luck, and he wished me good luck. And he kicked 12 goals. Boy, that was when Dick used to say then, Noel, if you get the ball around the centre, kick it to Coleman.
He was a freak, yeah.
Well, his marks, I did see Bob Pratt in the earlier years play, and I didn't think I'd ever see anybody that could mark as high or higher than Bob Pratt, and John Coleman was the fellow.
At the end of a quarter, if he'd only kicked 3 goals at this end, they'd all go to the other end.
Literally, we ran from one end of the ground to the other at Windy Hill to make sure that we're at the end that we weren't going to miss out on anything that John Coleman was able to achieve.
John Coleman was just 20 years old. He was a commerce student at Melbourne University, and yet in just a handful of games, he becomes the greatest superstar football's ever seen. In his first match, he kicked 12 goals. He kicked 100 in his first season. He polled 15 Brownlow medal votes. He played for Victoria. He won Essendon's Best and Fairest award. He kicked 6 goals in a winning grand final. What an absolute superstar.
Best I've ever seen, by far. Absolutely by far.
Finally, through the streamers, platted with the club's colours, the teams break through as they run out onto the mighty Melbourne Arena. Firstly, Essendon.
In John Coleman's second season, 1950, Essendon won another premiership, and the shooting star booted 4 goals in the grand final.
And now here's the first goal of the game, kicked by Essendon's champion full forward, John Coleman. Number 10, leading goal kicker for season 1950, with a grand total of 120 goals for the season.
He did things that I don't think I'd seen anybody certainly before, and certainly since.
He was a world beater, you know. He's still got his name hanging up on the wall everywhere now, and everybody's trying to win the Coleman medal.
In In the last home and away game of 1951, Coleman was reported for retaliating against Carlton fullback Harry Casper.
I heard a roar in the crowd and I turned around to see what it was. I just saw Coleman having a whack at Casper, and the umpires raced in, and this was just before half-time, by the way, so he moved off the ground, not thinking there was a great deal in it. I didn't really know he was reported.
When he came off at half-time, he was packing up, ready to go home, and Dick, as his coach, had to persuade him, no, that would look very bad, John, you've got to go back on the field, and he did go back on the field to finish off the match.
Oh, yes, he wanted to go home. Yeah, in fact, he was halfway home. I had to get him, shut everybody out the room. I got down and I sat and talked to him and told him that, you know, the worst thing he could do was to do that. And then he realised, and he said, yeah, look, I'll go out there and we'll beat these so-and-sos. And, gee, he went out and he was a different player altogether.
Coleman was suspended for 4 matches, arguably the most controversial suspension in football history. The champion missed the finals, and the Bombers lost the grand final to Geelong by just 11 points.
If he had played in the 51 grand final against Geelong, I think the result may have been different.
In 1952, Coleman topped the century again, and in 53, he won the league goal kicking for the 4th time.
His short pass is going to find the teammate. It has. It's found Hugh Mitchell upfield.
My first game was in 1953 at the MCG, and I was playing centre-half forward, and I kept looking over my shoulder and I kept asking myself, what am I doing on the same ground as this guy?
In round 8 of 1954, Coleman had scored 5 goals before half-time until disaster struck.
Like you did with John, you just kicked it high to the end of the square, and there was a pack went for the ball, and John hit the pack, as he often did, coming from the behind post, and then went down, and the doctor was out before he hit the ground.
Goals from me to you when he broke down, went up for the mark, came down, never played again.
I'd been only 20, 30 yards away. I went over to see him and his knee was like that, was completely out of joint.
They put him on the stretcher, and so of course his knee's facing into his other leg, and the thigh straight, so completely dislocated. It looked an absolute mess. So they took him off, but never did it cross my mind or anyone else that would be the last we'd see of him. Never from that, because he was bulletproof, indestructible.
The reaction was stunned silence at the grandstand. There was hardly a murmur, because it was right in front of the Essendon grandstand.
It was a sad day, not only for the Essendon Footy Club, but also to football in general.
They never played again, but I reckon he could nearly have gone on, you know.
As a footballer, that's the last we saw of him. Finished at 25. Kicked 540 goals, near as damn it. Played only 98 games. Finished at 25. A tragedy. An absolute tragedy. He was magnificent.
John told me the story. There's always been a question on why he never ever played a game. And I believe this is true, and I believe he told me personally that back when he did the injury, I think he was in the Essendon hotel at the time, and he wanted the club to insure him if his knee collapsed on him again and it put him out of work, and et cetera, et cetera. And the club weren't prepared to insure him.
In 1955, Coleman married Monica Fernando at St Thomas's Church in Moonee Ponds. A crowd of around 7,000 fans was so enthusiastic, they almost prevented Monica from entering the church.
Mum got mobbed, actually, trying to get to the church, St Thomas's. I had a photo of it, actually. They had to get a police escort.
Coleman's eldest daughter, Jenny, remembers her dad's sense of humour.
He was a bit of a joker at home. He used to sit there. He had a tooth that had been knocked out playing football, so one of his big party tricks was to pop it out while he's sitting at the dinner table, and sitting there looking like the village idiot, you know.
In 1961, Essendon appointed John Coleman to take over from Dick Reynolds as coach.
Coleman came in 61 and he knitted the team together, which we produced in 62. I think we only lost 2 games that season. And of course, the 65 premiership, we won from 4th place.
Everybody liked him, including the ladies, and he had that air about him, you know, that he could almost attract anyone to him.
His charisma was just unbelievable.
I was just a devotee of Coleman, so if Coleman asked me to do something, I just did it. There was never any argument to me for Coleman.
Coleman was, yes, a very shrewd tactician and a very steely-eyed, you can do better, Ken.
In my opinion, I feel that John Coleman was well before his time. If he was coaching today, I would say that he would be right up with him.
I was coached by Dick for 9 years, and but John was the start of a new era. He was demanding. He really thought about the team that we were going to play. He initiated having Friday night meetings at his hotel with the team.
I can remember one time, and unfortunately I forgot to go to one of the Friday night meetings, and I didn't realise it until I got home and there was a knock on the front door, and who was it? Coley. And I thought, oh, I'm in trouble now because, you know, I forgot the meeting. Anyway, he just came in. We had a chat about what they discussed at the meeting, what he expected of me. He said, are you happy with that? We've got an agreement on that? And I said, yep. And he left me. And I think a lot of other coaches would have perhaps said on the Saturday, where were you? Whatever. But Coley's approach wasn't like that at all. He was making sure that every player knew exactly where they stood with him. And forevermore, I've respected John Coleman as the best coach.
It is a drop kick, and it's going straight towards the centre of the goals. And it's a goal to Essendon, picked by the reliable Huey Mitchell.
In front, they battle for it hard. 2 kicking it off the ground, Rogers. Rice is in there for Geelong. Rogers comes through on the inside. Capuano picks it up instead. Capuano kicks the ball in towards the goal square again.
And there's Essendon again, but this time Paul Viner gets the ball. Doesn't know what to do with it. Handballs it across to Callan. Callan goes to handball it, puts it over it, and there's the end of the game. Well umpired by Bob Nunn, whose first semi-final was excellent. Coleman is jubilant, as all the Essendon fans are. They go into the grand final. They must be happy.
In the days leading up to the 1962 grand final, Coleman's biggest injury worry was ruckman Jeff Leake.
Jeff sprained his ankle the Thursday night prior to the grand final.
I got to the ground and I had to have a fitness test, as we've all done that. So the chairman and selectors was standing by, and he said, "You've got to kick this medicine ball to prove your ankle's okay." So you had to kick it. Had to kick the medicine ball. It was on the ground. It was.
They were men in those days, Jim.
I mean, everything was big in those days. So I gave this medicine ball a bit of a gingered kick, and they said, "You have to kick it harder than that." So I stood off and gave it a bit of a heavier kick, and a few more kicks, and they said, "Harder, harder." So in the last instance, I stood up and gave this mighty kick and moved the thing about 6 feet across the floor. So I said, "Please!" I was wrapped, and old Coleman said, "He's all right for me," but I didn't know even to this day that I was kicking it with my good foot.
8 minutes gone in the last quarter of the 1962 grand final.
He played a great game because he kept John Nichols quiet.
But not that comfortably. Here's Leake going for the knockaway. His go there towards Davis. Davis is tackled by Greenwood, but gets his kick in first. His kick is to the centre wing on the outer side. They chase it here. Into the players, Varlamov, 32. 19 is Somerville doing the kicking. Somerville kicks the ball onto the half-forward line, taken by Fraser. Handballs across to Blue. Blue blind turns, then runs into Varlamov. Gets his kick in first towards Burt. Burt at centre half-forward, has his head pulled off. Free kick.
Hill gets the ball, knocks it ahead of him, runs into his own teammate, handballs it across. There's the goal. Essendon the Premiers for 1962. Essendon 13 goals, 12-19 have defeated Carlton 8 goals, 10-58.
One of the happiest men in Melbourne at this stage.
Well, very happy to have won, Phil, yes. It just finishes off the season as far as we're concerned.
Well, John, this is direct on the air, and there'll be many, many Essendon supporters listening to you at this time. What would you like to say to them?
Well, we did our best, and thank heavens it was good enough to win it.
Oh, he's bad-tempered, bugger. You know, one thing he didn't like umpires.
And that was from his playing days. I think he used to get bashed up a bit and didn't think that he was being protected enough.
You can understand why, because the backmen against him were just, they'd use any sort of tactics, and the umpires, unfortunately, were being one umpire, they couldn't see what was going on.
Look, I can remember him one stage there trying to get onto the ground when Fraser got hit by, don't know who it was, might have been Patterson or someone. The doctors and that were hanging on to him to stop him from going on the ground, so he had a fiery temper.
Somebody asked Coleman, how good's Alec, how's he going? He said, he's not as good as he thinks he is. Well, that was in the paper next day, and my mum was just distraught that anybody would say that about me. We never got on for a long time, till we had an altercation one day. I threw a punch and he ducked, and I hit the club doctor, broke his nose and flattened him. We got on better friends after that. We were just great friends after that.
But the Dons strike back. Eepers puts the ball forward for Johnston to take a safe mark.
One day we were playing Collingwood, out of Collingwood, and we were out on the ground early, and somebody jumped the fence and ran out to Alec and shook his hand and gave him a dummy, baby's dummy. And so Alec just kept it in his hand, and he was playing on, of all people, Des Tuddenham. And when he went to shake hands with Des, he just passed the dummy over to Des.
When he came out to me to shake hands, he shook hands with me and said, "Here, I sucked this all day, this is a dummy." So I took it over to Crouch and I said, "Hey, Cooker gave me this to give to you." He said, "You're a sook."
It's just one of the only times I've ever seen Alec Epper speechless.
In the 1965 preliminary final, Essendon's John Somerville was knocked unconscious behind the play.
Somerville has just collapsed. I don't think he collapsed.
And I heard a roar over to my right on the other side, and the next thing I saw John lying on the ground, and Ken Fraser went over to pick him up, and that was unfortunate. And Ken Fraser went round to every player on the ground and said, "Concentrate on the game, don't get sucked in."
Now let's be quite honest about this, it looks pretty serious.
Louis Shelton was looking for a few blokes to even up. We had to control him.
I don't really think it was my natural way. I was sort of strong and maybe slow by standards, but you have to use what you had, and with Coleman wanting us to play more aggressively, well, it meant a bit more physical stuff from the likes of me.
Almost 105,000 spectators at Melbourne Cricket Ground for the VFL Grand Final between Essendon, 11 times winner of the flag, and St Kilda.
The club's enforcer, Ian Bluey Shelton, had injured his right shoulder in the preliminary final. So an hour before the grand final, Coleman gave Bluey a final fitness test.
Coley said, "Now I want you to come and bump into me a bit." So, of course, the adrenaline's running pretty fiercely at this stage. I crashed Coley into the wall, and I remember Harry Hunter, the chairman of the selector, say, hey, that's enough, and pulled me away. So they reckon I was ready to go.
Louis Shelton takes the first mark of the game to turn play back. He survived the fitness test shortly before the match for a shoulder injury sustained in the preliminary final against Collingwood.
Bluey lost an eye in a welding accident up at his farm. So we still stayed the same, Epps, Shelton, Davis. Barry Davis came to me one day before the game. He goes, "Hey, listen," he goes, "this is not fair what's happening." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I'm on Bluey's wrong side and he's run through me 4 times.
Well, it was an off-farm accident when I was watching a bloke fix a tractor at Avenel, and a bit of steel unfortunately found the dead set middle of my right eye, and I missed a complete year, and it was thought that I wouldn't or shouldn't play again, but I loved the game so much that I wanted to still be involved. I loved the cut and thrust of the games out here.
Bluey's the most lovable bloke you could ever meet. Rough as guts, but got a heart of gold, loved his farm. There was a lot of respect with the teammates, with Bluey Sheldon, because he was not only a great player, but he was a good man to have in your team. Strong, very strong.
If you got an opportunity, you had to give him a bit of a heave-ho.
From the throw-in, Mitchell, veteran of more than 200 games, gains possession for the Bombers as the Saints are looking a trifle ragged. The consistent Blue lands the ball with Fordham, who takes a great mark. Clark from the centre shoots the ball to Fordham, who marks, but he's met heavily by Dittrich. Burt pushes at the blonde ruckman, and umpire Crouch intervenes. A state representative player for the past 2 seasons, 19 years old Dittrich has a vigorous approach to the game. Fordham recovers to kick his 4th goal. Hanson's goal tops the century for the Dons, and the siren is only seconds away. Final scores 14-21-105 to 9-16-70.
And there's a very happy-looking John Coleman with his back to us in the light coat, the coach of Essendon and one of the greatest full forwards the game has seen in Victoria.
Ken Fraser receives the VFL Premiership Cup from League President Sir Kenneth Luke. It's Essendon's 12th flag, and congratulations are well deserved. Perhaps for Darryl Baldock and the Saints, it'll be their turn next year.
How would you go against these fellas playing today? Wouldn't get a kick.
My big job now is to get them back into form and back into the fore.
Well, you're saying you're a year-to-year prospect, as far as a coach is
I'm
concerned.
a week-to-week at the moment.
On the 5th of April, 1973, the unthinkable happened. John Coleman died of a massive heart attack. He was just 44.
One of my most horrible experiences in my life was I had a phone call from Ted Rippon at midnight, the day prior to John passing away, to say that he was in big trouble.
Oh, I think everyone was absolutely destroyed by an outright champion like him passing so young.
Absolutely blindsided because, well, I looked at him as invincible.
I can still remember his funeral down at the church down here. The whole of Essendon stopped for it.
We had the service at St Thomas's, where Mum and Dad were in fact married, and people were crying in the street as we sort of drove off, you know.
He had a profound influence on my life. I felt sad that I would never have that influence again.
I get emotional thinking about it. Sorry.
He was in fact not in Essendon that night.
Coleman had been helping out at the Dramana Hotel.
And then, of course, they couldn't find a doctor, and he'd complained for a couple of hours, in fact, and then just slumped forward. Well, they tell me that there's a window to get yourself to a doctor, which would have happened, I've no doubt, if he'd been in Essendon.
I'm so emotional about it. Yeah.
Remarkable man.
Yep, he really was. 1 in a million.
Don McKenzie, Ted Fordham, all of those, I know that they just loved him because they were always around. They were either at the farm or, you know, they were always around. And I remember after Dad passed away, we walked down and I saw Don McKenzie, and he was in the car and he was just crying. I could see him. And I went in and I said, I saw Don outside, and Mum said, oh, he didn't come in. So he obviously got too upset he couldn't come in. very sad, extremely sad that he didn't stay alive long enough to, in fact, see us grow, and my children and now my grandchildren. I often think of that. I just wonder if my life would have been different. I don't know. So many of them, they blot their copybooks, these champions, don't they? Either he didn't live long enough to do it or he was never going to. I don't know.
I look back and think, I wish he was still around. I look back and think, I wish there were more people like him. He was a hard man, but he was the fairest man. He could understand people one-on-one like no one else ever knew.
Next on the Bombers, how Jeff Blethyn started a grand final wearing just one contact lens.
This has been a Fox Sports production.